Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Beneath the Surface. We'll go beyond the highlights and the stats and talk about the stories that shape who we become because everybody sees the outcome, but not everybody gets to understand the journey it took to get here. Today, I'm going to sit down with somebody who played a major role in my journey. This is someone who, at the time, opened up doors that I didn't even know where to knock at. He helped me connect with opportunities in arena football. He helped me get to Green Bay and gave me a shot when I needed just one shot from everything I've been through. But what people don't see is what it takes to be behind that person behind the scenes. Okay. The leadership, the vision, the belief in others. So today, we're going to sit down and get beneath the surface with Scott Porter. And so, Scott, would you mind introduce yourself to our listeners today, please?
Sure. I'm Scott Porter. A little bit of my background with kind of to relate with DJ would just be with indoor football. I think the best way to describe this is the way I got started into this was when I was in college. I had a deep passion for the NFL draft. Created my own NFL draft website. I was one of those crazy kids. I was watching the NFL draft in second grade when ESPN aired the first round and nobody really watched the draft. It wasn't a big deal. People thought I was crazy for sitting through a whole NFL draft. As I got older, I got deep into it. It was a passion of mine, created my own NFL draft website. And I started interviewing a lot of college football players. And I interviewed guys such as Dante Whitner, Joe Hayden, Richard Sherman, kind of some big names. And then I started having agents that would actually hit me up to interview their players, their clients. And then I stayed in touch with, kind of became friends with a lot of these guys that I talked to. And then, long story short, a lot of these guys didn't get an NFL opportunity. I found out that the local team in Iowa, where I'm from, Cedar Rapids, was they got an indoor football team. So a lot of these players, I started helping them get into this indoor football league. And I think at first, a lot of these coaches, they didn't really know who I was or who I had for them. Green Bay, as we'll go into a little more depth with, they were kind of the first team to really believe in me. I started sending players to teams, and I think that sort of morphed from there where coaches, knew that I had good connections to players and so on and so forth. So that's really how I kind of got into the indoor football world, was just a passion with the NFL draft and making connections that way, kind of self-made, so to speak. So, and then I'm still doing that to this day.
Yeah, that's something special, man. Like I said, it's glad to have you, man. It's glad for you to kind of grow through that passion and kind of have that. You know what I mean? That's just something we're all appreciative of. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, for sure. It's been awesome though, DJ.
yeah. Yeah, and I say it's been awesome kind of getting to know you as well too. You know what I mean? The relationship we've had, obviously we still continue to be beyond football. You know, even in life, we still have a relationship as well too, be able to connect today as well. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Thank you for everything you've done for all the players and myself. You know what I mean? We just can't even thank you enough, you know. So, kind of get into, you kind of gave us a backdrop of how you got into football, you know, watching the draft as a kid and whatnot, right? Can you talk to us about your journey, where your journey started from and what your early years were like?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, it's no great feel good story or anything like that, like maybe yourself has, DJ. But I don't know. I just think growing up, football was like the only thing I ever really liked. I didn't have a lot of interest, I'll admit. But I can still remember as a kid watching football with my mom and dad. And, my dream was to play in the NFL. I sat there while all my friends played Nintendo and stuff. And I was outside throwing the football up to myself, tackling, pretending like I was professional football players, diving on the ground. I can remember sitting in grade school, elementary school, and during study halls or when I'm supposed to be learning like math, I was daydreaming that I was going to be the number one overall pick in the NFL draft. I remember thinking I'll never go to my favorite team, the Broncos, because they're too good. I'm going to end up playing for the Cleveland Browns or at the time the San Diego Chargers, because they weren't good teams.
Yeah.
And then it just, as I got older, I sort of started to realize, hey, I'm from a small town in Iowa. Nobody's ever going to notice me. And I'm like, sort of became, a passion of mine to kind of follow the NFL draft and follow college football. And then that sort of morphed into just my passion for creating my website, and getting to know players. And I feel like a lot of, even high profile NFL players relied on me because their agents, did not have the best information, or they had so many clients that they didn't get good feedback from them. And that just kind of morphed into relationships with players. One of my favorite one was Brandon Merriweather of the New England Patriots and Bruce Johnson of the New York Giants. They actually let me pick their jersey numbers when they got to the NFL because I built such a good relationship with them. And basically, that's really how my indoor football and helping players sort of got started.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great, man. Like I said, that's a great story. It's just crazy like these relationships we have with these people, you know what I mean? And you kind of continue to do that too as well, you know. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. I wanted to ask too as well, what is something that people don't know you went through as a kid or throughout your childhood that you feel like you want to share?
A good question. What I went through. I would say if anything that I think that a lot of people may not know about me is, I feel like as a child I really lacked confidence. And, I didn't go through any high adversity. I came from, I can't complain about the family I came from. Very loving and supportive. But I do feel like, I was sort of a shy kid growing up, and I feel like I really lacked confidence, and that sort of held me back sometimes of maybe even sort of, pursuing my own dream of playing football and at a higher level.
Yeah.
And I sort of held that in. I didn't talk to anybody about it. I just was never a real confident person. And I think that, helping players out and helping, these guys in college football learn about draft stock and kind of give them tips sort of built my confidence of, hey, this is something that I can do. Like I have such a deep passion for football and knowledge base for it that it sort of built my confidence and self esteem just helping players out. So
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that for sure. And would you say that was a moment that kind of tested you the most, or do you have anything you feel like kind of tested you as growing up?
yeah, I mean, I wish I had a good story for you, DJ, honestly. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would say that you just kind of that, lacking the confidence or self-esteem was probably my biggest drawback. Yeah.
Was there a person that kind of shifted that moment for you then? Was there somebody kind of like you confided in?
I would say probably my parents for the most part. They were always, even when I was playing sports in high school, they were always very supportive and encouraging and confident in me. I never really talked to them about any confidence issues or anything like that. But I
Okay.
think that they were sort of the people that sort of pushed me to be the best that I could be, kind of believed in me, to kind of
Okay.
pursue what I got into.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for sharing that for sure. So if you could talk to your younger self as a kid, what would you tell your younger self then with everything where you're at now?
Yeah. I would say if I could talk to my younger self, I would probably say, um, take more chances and, put yourself out there a little bit more. I feel like sort of as I started doing what I was doing, I never really talked about it. I think I was really silent about it, and in this industry, you really got to know it's who you know, so to speak. So I
Yeah.
think that for me, it's like I would have been a little more aggressive in pursuing some of these things, like, even becoming like an NFL agent or GM. And instead of just kind of doing this stuff in the background, be a little more aggressive and look at opportunities that could kind of push me through.
Most definitely. Definitely. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And I think a lot of us need to kind of reflect and kind of do that as well. You know what I mean? Like some of the lessons you learn as you get older, sometimes you got to talk to your younger self. You know what I mean? The confidence you have as you're older, sometimes you got to talk to your younger self to kind of, boast that up or
Yep.
whatnot. So thanks for sharing that experience, man. I wanted to know too as well, in your perspective, right? How do we connect? How do you feel like we connected and what do you see within me when we first talked?
That's a good question, DJ. I'm really glad you brought that up because I was actually been thinking about that the last day or so. So I know how you and I connected was there was a player that you played college football with that I knew very well when he was at Wyoming, and his name was
Yeah.
Tayshawn Gibson.
My guy
And
T Whip, man.
yep, and he played in the NFL. I think this was
Yeah.
actually his first year out after what was it, a 12-year career maybe.
Yep.
Um, and Tayshawn was undrafted and he went to the Cleveland Browns, did a draft
Yep.
interview with him, really good guy. And I had hit him up and asked him, hey, if you have any friends or anything at Wyoming that are looking to play indoor football, I've sort of grown my path to help players out. And he gave me
Yeah.
three names. He gave me you, he gave me Mazi Angbana, the wide receiver,
Yeah.
and I can't remember. It was a defensive lineman that was on your team, and I can't. The name escapes me right now.
Okay.
You will know him, obviously. If you said his name, I would
Was it
know him.
Like Mike Purcell, was it?
Not Mike
I'm
Purcell. He
thinking.
actually played indoor football, I believe, for the Wyoming team, the Wyoming Cavalry.
Okay, yeah, we'll come back to that
We'll
and
come back
figure
to
that
that.
eventually.
Yes. So right away, I got Mossy an offer for Wyoming. They wanted him right away. They knew who he was,
Yeah,
playing at Wyoming.
yeah,
And then there was you. And basically to me, like when I had talked, he is a great guy. So don't, I'm not saying anything about him, but when I talked to you on the phone, what really struck out to me is how nice of a person you were. Mozzie, I didn't
yeah,
have to talk much on the phone because I got him his offer right away.
yeah,
The defensive end actually had an offer before I even got into contact with him. And then I
yeah,
think for me with you, I'd had a phone conversation with you, and I just felt like you were such a super nice person and very thankful and appreciative. And I had basically no film of you, if you remember at this
yeah,
time. And I
yeah,
looked on the website and I saw like even like your physique and what you looked like. I'm like, this guy looks like he'd be a really good wide receiver. And he's a
yeah,
very good person and very hungry. And I'm like, even with no film, I want to help this guy out. I'm like, I'm gonna make this happen no matter what. And at that point,
yeah,
that was kind of the start of my indoor. I feel like most coaches, I could sort of help people without film, but only to a certain magnitude. And with you not having eye-popping stats because of your circumstances at Wyoming. I knew it was gonna be
yeah.
tough, but I wanted to make it happen. And you were like the first person that I really helped with lack of resource, so to speak. So that's how you and I connected. So we'll go
Yeah,
from
and
there.
I think that yeah, I think that's kinda glad I'm glad you kinda took a chance on me because, like I said at the time, I had came to Wyoming for 2 years and, I had some things psychologically as far as injuries that were kinda messing with me psychologically, but at the time, like, I didn't really know, what I mean, those issues at the time. Like, structurally, everything was fine, but mentally and psychologically, my mind was just spinning, what I mean? I had a lot of problems going on back at home, trying to figure out my identity, who I was, I had been kidnapped, all the stuff I was going through in high school, like, not having parents, coaches leaving in Wyoming left and right. The coach that recruited me there left. They brought all the different resources. It was like a lot of moving pieces, not having somebody kind of sit there and talk to the whole time kind of just messed with me psychologically, especially
Yep.
everything so I just couldn't put everything together. I had so much stuff just mentally just in
You got
my
a lot
head
of
that
adversity. You had a lot of adversity.
yeah, so I was trying to figure everything out, and so, like I said, when we talked to T. Gip and he talked to you and you kinda connected, I was like, "Man, okay," and then just kinda talking to you on the phone, like, "Man, like, this dude, like, why" it's in my head, I was like, "Man, why is this dude helping me out?" You know what I mean? I didn't know nothing about transfer rules, I know nothing. Football wasn't my first sport, we all know that. Soccer was, you know what I mean? I didn't even
Yep.
start playing to my freshman year in high school, and then I played 5 coaches in 4 years in high school, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So,
Yeah.
like, a lot of moving pieces. We had Henry Lusk my senior year and, 4 years, 4 seasons. He played for the 49ers, whatnot, but 4 years, 4 games in the season, it gets fired. And it was like a lot of moving pieces. So that's how mentally everything for me just kind of happened, but I'm glad you took a chance on me, basically. I was like, man, like this dude, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I felt like you
And,
just got lost in the shuffle like so many college
yeah.
players. You just got lost in the shuffle.
So, man, it was just a crazy thing overall. So, um, that kind of correlated to the opportunity. So as we kind of move forward, you kind of brought up Green Bay, what I mean? We had talked about it at times. When I finished at YO, I went back to Salt Lake City. I started working with kids at the time and I was trying to figure out, my identity, my life, what to do. But I knew like psychologically I still play the game, you know what I mean? But I had a couple crucial drops that I dropped, but I know mentally it wasn't because of my ability, but I had an injury that wasn't diagnosed at the time. And so I started playing for the Utah Blaze. I started hearing about, the Utah Blaze in Salt Lake City, Utah. So I was like, man, let's go try out for the team. So I ended up going to camp for them. And after 2 weeks, I got released. So that's when the conversation happened. When T Get talked to you, we had a conversation and connected that way. And so he's like, hey, like, we got a team in Green Bay. And we had that conversation on the phone. And I remember that. And so at the time when we talked about Green Bay, can you tell me what was going on the team and why you brought me in at that time?
Yeah, I think for me, like I had such a good relationship with their head coach, Robert Fuller. That's my guy. That's the first guy that ever believed in me in indoor football. I feel like a lot of players don't realize, but he probably paved the way for them because he paved the way for me. And it was kind of getting towards the end of the season, and I had talked to him about you for a while. And Coach Fuller's a good guy where he just doesn't want to
Yeah.
release somebody to bring somebody in. He gives guys, ample amount of opportunity opportunity. He really cares about his players. And something, it's actually going to sign Mozzie at one time earlier in the season, but he waited and Wyoming ended up signing him. So then I kind of circled back to him at the end of the season. I think they had maybe an injury or something. And I basically told, hey, hey, Coach Fuller, I basically had to give him the spiel that if you really believe in me, will believe in DJ Lester at this point. It's like,
Yeah.
just trust me. This guy can play. You showed me your film at Utah. Um, you showed me practice film from Wyoming, I believe. And I was like, just give
Hmm.
this guy a chance. He is a great guy. And I've said, if you get on the phone with him, you're going to want to bring him in. And really, to me, it was sort of like that end of the year. They've lost some players at this point, and now they got to be willing, some players got to be willing to go there for just a couple of weeks and be okay with that. Because don't forget, in indoor football, you've got to pay your own way to play for these teams, and a lot of
Yes.
guys don't want to do that for 2 or 3 weeks of football. And you knew the hoops that you had to go through to make this happen. And I swear, DJ, you would have probably walked to Green Bay at that point if you would have had to get there,
Yeah.
And Coach Fuller got on the phone with you, and the same thing that when I talked to you is he fell in love with you as a person, not
Yeah.
only, football, but basically just you deserve the opportunity, So that's how we got you to Green Bay.
Yeah, and it was so crazy because, like I said, I remember that phone call, just talking to him on the phone because he was advocating for me, and I remember talking to him on the phone. And when I got off the phone, he's like, "Okay, like, yeah, let's get out here." So, like you said, I was very hungry for the opportunity because I knew I still had ability. It was just because of my ability, I knew something was wrong psychologically, but at the time, I couldn't figure out what it was. You know what I mean? Structurally, everything
Yep.
was there. Mentally, it was just something going on. But I was a man, like I knew Wyoming didn't go as accordingly how I wanted to go, and things didn't pan out that way. But I was like, man, like I still got fight in me. I still got something left, in the tank. So I ended up taking a trip to Green Bay when we flew out there. And I remember my first night getting out there. I landed and I got taken to the team apartments. I had Dirty, Darius Davis.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
so he was my roommate. Him, so the rooms are always occupied already. So I ended up sleeping on a futon in the living room. And, so Derek was the first person to actually kinda talk to me. He was like, "Hey, man, like, are you hungry?" Because remember, at time, we had practice the next morning, had everything just kinda getting a routine. It was the last 2 games of the season. And, so I'm like, "Okay." So he kinda talked to me, "Hey, bro," like, 'cause he went to Memphis, and he was like, "Hey, man, like, I used to be, the player captain and everything. I just saw, like, you just landed. Nobody was talking to you, no resources." I said, "Bro, like, I appreciate you just kinda doing that." So me and him kinda bonded that way. And, so he got food, and so we kinda connected that way. And so I also
Y-
went to practice and took care of that and whatnot. It was a humbling experience for sure. I had to wake up real quick, and at the time, I just had my football bag, my backpack, and my suitcase. That's all I had I was traveling with.
Yeah. That's great. I remember just being, you were so low maintenance, DJ, that
Yeah,
I was like, DJ, are you in Green Bay? Like I hadn't heard from you. You're like, yeah, man, I'm here. I'm returning kicks and stuff. And it just, I
yeah,
don't know. Once you got to Green Bay, it felt so good to have you there. Just to get you that opportunity, and you really took off with it from there.
yeah. What was your, expectation of me when I got to Green Bay, and then what stood out to you, like, the last couple games while being at Green Bay?
It's a good question. My expectation, like I really didn't know what to expect, to be honest with you. My expectations with 2 games left is I hope this guy just gets, maybe as their fourth receiver kind of gets in there and makes some plays and we got some momentum to going into next year. Like you had a very
Yeah,
short time to prove yourself. But I will never forget. So you played at Cedar Rapids your last game of the season. And I'm from Iowa City, which is 20 minutes away from Cedar
yeah,
Rapids. And I was so excited to come down to Green Bay to see the new guy, DJ Lester. Like that,
yeah,
like I can still remember just thinking the whole way down, like I want to see this guy so bad succeed.
yeah,
And you took the opening kickoff, and I was so happy you were just on kick returns that game, and you did a really good job returning kicks. I remember, um, and then you made some plays on offense. Ryan Valentine, of course, was the go-to receiver in that offense. But I could tell right away. I'm like, okay, this is something that next year you are going to really take off because you had just started, 2 games at the end of the season and started showing your ability and stuff. And I'm like, this guy, and then from there on, I'm like, I'm gonna have no problem helping this guy in his
yeah,
professional football career. So my expectations were really I don't want to say low because I knew you were a good player, but with 2 games left, I was just kind of expecting to get your feet wet. And honestly, I think for me, you probably are one of the, out of all the players that helped indoor football, you're kind of in that select group who took off from the moment that you ever touched the football in the IFL. And I know that
Yeah.
Coach Fuller fell in love with you as a player in person, even though he had lost his job, but he got to watch you, and that would get us into the next, eventually get you to the mid.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing is, yeah, you shared that. That was kinda how, like you said, so obviously I came in under Coach Fuller, so you can kinda talk about experience, and then it was like a coaching transition at the time, so I was talk Coach Fuller, he loved me and everything like that, and then so they had made a switch with Coach Baldwin, so you can you share about that experience at the time?
Yeah, that was really, I was really bummed out when Coach Fuller lost his job, obviously, because that was my main guy. But
Yeah,
Coach Baldwin, who actually recently passed away, as you know,
yeah,
he like him and I connected. He talked to me on the phone, and just being around the players that I had there for that entire season made me feel really good that he was the guy to take that job over, even though Coach
yeah,
Fuller had lost his job at the time. Coach Baldwin, right away, he was on board with you getting there and all that stuff. He wanted to get you involved right away, see what you can do. And I think just that's where the person you were really came into effect, that these two coaches are really good people and they want to see really good people succeed. And
yeah,
that's exactly why they wanted to give you that opportunity. I was a little nervous when the coaching change first happened.
yeah.
It all worked out for you.
Yeah, and I remember, like I said, when the coaching switch happened, say obviously Coach Fuller, obviously when he got lost his job, so Coach Baldwin came in. So I remember talking to him on the phone. He's kind of talking to me about my character and whatnot. So I kind of shared a little bit about my story and RIP to him, obviously. And he had brought up to me, he was like, "Hey, like we got a bunch of guys here that are not appreciative of the opportunity, right? Because a lot of
Yep.
people don't appreciate that." And so he kind of asked me, say, "Hey, like, like, do you mind just kind of sharing your story with the team? Because I'm trying to build the morale up because people just kind of checked out because there's 2 games left in the season. Everybody just like, oh, okay, I can't wait till the end of the season to go home." And so we kind of connected and kind of build that bond. So he's like, okay, like, yeah, let me bring him in. So I remember coming in to practice and we were sitting there. So after practice, you about just kind of sitting down and so he kind of asked me, say, "Hey, do you mind just kind of sharing to the team about just being grateful for the opportunity?" Because me, I was hungry, I was just looking for one
Yep.
shot, like I just needed a chance, an opportunity. And so I remember just sitting there, just like, man, like I ain't never spoke to nobody before. Everything I've been through, I kind of kept internally because everything I went through, like I just had to ball it up and keep to myself. I had never spoke to nobody really about it. I was talking about writing a book and doing all these great things, etc. at the time. So I said, okay. So I sat around in the team and I remember just start sharing my story a little bit with everybody, but you could just see everybody's eyes just kind of start getting glued to you. Like to me, I'm like, I started connecting with all the people, you know what I mean? So I'm like, oh, like, so this is what it feels like to kind of share the story of impact and resilience. So I was like, okay. So I shared my story and I kind of started tearing up because I'm like, man, like, this makes me feel good to kind of share my story and impact a lot of people, because a lot of people don't know what it's like to come. I mean, people go through things, but not to go through what I went through and still
Yes.
kind of come to the top. You know what I mean? Like it just kind of brought
Yep.
everybody kind of together. You could just feel that bond and that
Yeah.
camaraderie. So when we finished the team, I mean, the season that year, we had a little barbecue at the end. You know what I mean? Everybody's like, oh, yeah, we'll see you next year. Da da da. You're going to great player. So that kind of made me feel good about everything overall.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where we, yeah. So
I
it was
think for me, DJ, like,
great.
you didn't even share your story with me, I think, until after that season. And I was just shocked at how positive and, you as a person for going through all that. And maybe that adversity kind of led to
Yeah.
that. But I was just like, how could this happen to a person who's such a good person? So I learned a
Yeah.
lot about your story, and it was pretty touching story, so to speak, which makes you just want to help the person even more.
Most definitely. Yeah. And so kind of going to that. So obviously when we finished Green Bay, I had to make my way back to Salt Lake City. So before went to Salt Lake City, I wanted to ask you, obviously a lot of people don't understand what it takes to how tough it is from arena football and indoor football and pro football. Can you explain the toughness of arena football and pro football for people that don't realize what the toughness is for the off
Yeah.
season and the goal
You want me to
and things
explain
like that?
the difference between the two, or just the toughness of the two combined, so to speak?
We could just talk about the toughness. Obviously, the
Okay.
AFL is obviously we get paid more money, more. You could talk. I mean, you
Yeah.
could talk about whatever you want to share to the group. You can.
Yeah. Yeah. I think from what I've learned from just dealing with players, that people don't really know is, the adversity and the kind of political side of football and what players have to go through. I think a lot of people think that, football players are just naturally good. and they play a sport that they are good at and love. And I don't think people realize how hard that you guys work. They don't realize, there's a lot of good athletes there, but to get to any professional level, whether it's indoor, outdoor, NFL, anything like that, like you have to basically commit your life to eating healthy, working out, doing the right things off the field, putting your body through what you have to do and the discipline that it takes. And I don't think that people realize how hard players work. And if you look at somebody like you, how hard, that you had to work just for an opportunity in indoor football where you're not getting paid millions, and
Yeah.
the kind of route and sacrifices that you're looking to make to get to, try to get up as far as you can, at each
Yeah.
individual level from the IFL to the AFL to either the CFL or the NFL, and kind of what the goal is. I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking guys leaving their families for $250, just to try to make things work and better their lives to try to get to the top level of football that they can. And then
Yeah.
on top of the mental, like, the mental aspect is so much of football. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have it mentally, you're never going to survive in football. And
Yeah.
trusting the process and going through the adversity and the everyday stuff. There is no off season in football. There really isn't,
Yeah.
because you're always putting your body through, a workout or something, that it's just such a grind that people don't
Yeah.
realize.
Yeah. And thanks for kind of sharing that perspective and that light up for people. You know what I mean? So how much of success is talent versus timing versus relationships, would you say overall?
I would say, so your question was how much, can you say that again?
So I said, how much of success in the indoor league or professional or football, basically athletes in general, is talent versus timing versus relationships?
Yeah, I think they all correlate together really well. I think obviously you have to have talent to play,
Yeah.
professional football, whether that's indoor football or the NFL. And I do feel that relationships has a huge impact on it, especially probably for players that are kind of in a situation like yourself. If you're a high level college player, you're going to get that opportunity with the combine. Teams are going to know about you. If you look
Um,
at somebody like yourself, you really had to build relationships to get to where you were, and you kind of had to build yourself from the bottom up. And then the timing is huge, which is kind of funny you asked that question, because I will tell so many indoor football players that I help today that timing is everything. If I have a player who wants an opportunity like yourself, if they're going to be impatient, I can get them a spot, but it's like you have to get the right situation. Not every
yeah.
situation is the best for a player. And a lot of times that's timing. Look, and look at your situation where you had to wait a while, and Green Bay gave you your opportunity, and they gave
Yeah.
you a fair opportunity. You took off. You could have gone to another team, and maybe your opportunity and situation isn't as good. And maybe,
Yeah.
you know, I run into this a lot where people don't then trust the process. Say, hey, this was not a fair opportunity. I don't want to do indoor football again. So it's all kind of about the timing on where you go when you go.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hopefully that helped answer your question, DJ.
Oh yeah, that gives some perspective. Obviously, I wanted to kind of shed light for people to kind of see that sometimes you got to be in the best situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's the right coach, the right place, the right environment, the right timing, the right relationships. Everything goes hand in hand, like you said, with a lot of things. So a lot of people don't see it that way, and people always want to rush the opportunity. You know what I mean? But me,
yeah,
like it was like where I came from. You know what I mean? From being born in the States and living in Nigeria my first 10 years. Like it taught me how to be resilient and having less. You know, it'd be very
yeah,
simple. You know, live off simplicity. Simplicity equaled happiness for me. So like I just needed just a shot, like an opportunity. I knew
yeah,
my abilities, but I just had to, be in the right situation to kind of show that, to people. So
yeah.
thanks for answering that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think one thing to
Yeah.
add on to that players make the biggest mistake, at least in the indoor level, is being impatient with it and the whole
Oh yeah.
process, where they just, I get this mindset, but you think you can go beat on anybody, and that might be true. But I've learned in indoor football, and probably even in any level, NFL too, you don't always get the most fair opportunity just because you get an opportunity. You got to go to the right
Yeah.
opportunity. And that's really where I kind of came in. That's kind of why I got big into what I do, is because I felt like a lot of these coaches weren't always honest with players. And then
Yeah.
players didn't have that voice. They didn't have that person in between a coach and a player to really know what's legit and kind of, guide them to whatever opportunity was the best for them. And that's sort of what I found myself kind of like, okay, you guys need me. It's not just
Yeah.
it's fun for me, but I'm like, see kind of the politics that go on with indoor football. And I'm like, I feel like, I'm like, you guys are relying on me is kind of how I saw
Yeah.
it. So,
Yeah, most definitely. I'm not gonna lie to you. I did, you know what I mean? And so, cause after everything that happened in Green Bay, once we finished the season off, like to me, like you said, it was an off-season grind. Something I had to psychologically prepare my mind to because I didn't have a lot of film. I didn't know what to do next, right? And so we talked about you open up the door. So I was in camp with Utah, the Utah Blaze in Utah for 2 weeks. So I got released after that. So I felt like I was doing what I had to do. But like you said, I had a couple of drops because mentally, structurally, everything was good, but I had a couple of injuries that, I didn't find out till later on.
yep.
And so when I went back to Salt Lake, I was working with kids at the time, still trying to figure out the opportunity, what's next, what's next. We kind of kept in contact that way. So then I get a call from Iowa Barnstormers to come down for a 2-day workout. And I don't know if you remember that or not. So I was like, oh,
Yes.
okay, like it's another opportunity. We talked about it. And so, I took another opportunity. So I used my paycheck from the job. I bought a one-way flight to Des Moines, Iowa. So at the time, I was like psychologically, Moines, where is this place? So I was thinking about, Ohio because I was born in
Y-
Ohio. And I don't know if you remember that or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I do. Now that you're telling me all this, yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah. And so I remember landing in Des Moines, Iowa, at the airport. This was way back, before Ubers and things like that. So I landed in Des Moines Airport and, I went to baggage claim, grabbed my bag. And so I had $20 in my pocket at the time, So after I bought the one-way flight and everything like that. So I landed in Des Moines, Iowa. I'm looking like, okay, where's Iowa? They kept on talking about corn and, all this stuff. So I'm like, whatever. I landed, and so there was a taxi guy where the Iowa airport is. The other side was taxis at the time back in 2015, and so I reached out to the guy and I said, "Hey, look, I got $20 in my pocket. Can you take me, close to the Wells Fargo Arena at the time?" So the guy was like, "Okay, like I'll take you up there. It'd be like $30." I said, "Look, I only got $20." He said, "He's all right, cool." So he drove me to the Radisson Inn right behind the Wells Fargo Arena. So he
Yep.
drops me up. I had my backpack, my suitcase, and my football bag. You remember, like I said, I was low maintenance and everything. So
Yes.
I walk in and I tell the guy, I say, "Hey, man, how much is it gonna cost for the night?" He's like, "Oh, about 179." I said, "Oh, I ain't even got that, whatever." I said, "Okay." So I said, "I'm here for 2 days. I'm trying to get signed a contract." And so I snuck to the conference room. I set my football bag down. I don't know if you remember, I called you on the phone. We talked and caught up or whatever.
Yes. Yep.
So I was like, "Oh, cool," like, whatever. So, I caught a little power nap. And so about like 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up, got ready. I walked through the security entrance and, the back to Wells Fargo Arena. And so I go
Yep.
through the arena, like I'm walking it up. So I look up in the rafters and I see Kurt Warner's name at the top. So I'm like, Kurt Warner, like, you know what I'm saying? I remember when he used to play for the Rams back in the Super Bowl when Kevin
Yep.
Dyson, because my mom and them, we used to go to church with Kevin Dyson's mom. And so when he ran that slant route and was on 1 yard short from the Super Bowl when the Rams won the Super Bowl that year, you know what I'm
Yep.
saying? So I'm Kurt Warner, like,
It's
what?
coming together now.
Whatever. Yeah, it's like, whatever. So I'm like, whatever. So I walked to the locker room. I was in the visitors locker room. And so, I got my equipment, helmet, shoulder pads, everything. So I set my foot back down. So I was there for a 2-day workout. And I felt like I was doing what I needed to do workout wise. But they had a bunch of receivers on the roster. They had like Darius Money Reynolds, Thomas, Jesse Schmidt, the Soup, like all these players on the roster, the receivers on the roster. Coach Ho was like, "Well, I can't sign you." I'm like, "Oh my God." Like I just use all my money to pay for one-way flight out here. And then I get released after a 2-day workout. So like we talk about our resilience again. So I'm like, "Oh
Yep.
my God, here we are." But then they start talking about Kurt Warner, the story, how he da 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 da. So I'm like, "Oh my God." So now I got to find my way back to Salt Lake City because that was for my job working with kids. So I called around, got a, one-way flight back to Salt Lake. So look, I'm done.
You're tired of traveling at this point.
Yeah, I said enough is enough. You know what I mean? I'm trying my best. I'm using all my resources. I had very limited resources. I didn't have mom and dad I can call. I didn't have grandma I can call. I ain't had nobody I can call. Like, "Hey, let me hold some money real quick." I said, it is what it is. So I flew back to Salt Lake City. I don't know if you remember this or not. So I'm like, okay, I'm done. I start working again. So like the next week, I get a call from the Utah Blaze and they was like, "Hey, like come out here for a 2-day workout." So I'm like, "Bro,
Yep.
I'm not out here. Like, you know what I mean? I just got cut from Iowa. I'm not going to do this again." I was like, "All right, whatever." So I was like, "Oh, this is my last chance to do it." So I ended up coming in and, like I said, one of the receivers got hurt. So then I signed my contract on a Wednesday, Thursday. I don't know if you remember this or not.
I remember
So
this. Yep.
yeah, I got picked up in the AFL. And then so I'm like, okay, fine. I finally get my foot. It was like 4 or 5 games left in the season at that point. It was like the back end of the season. So they had lost a bunch of games and we're talking about the playoffs. It was kind of very close. close race. And the year they won a bunch of games or whatever, they had like Tommy Grady and Aaron LaSway and all these people doing great things. And so I was like, all right. So I went in there. And so the first week, I don't know if you remember this, I ran down on kickoffs, made a couple tackles, make a
I do
blocks,
remember
whatever.
that. Yep.
Got no action on offense. And so the second week, New Orleans Voodoo came down. And so AJ pops his hamstring. This was like the craziest thing to me. He pops his hamstring. And I was still learning the game at the time. You know what I mean? Like still trying to figure everything out, trying to figure out how the routes were set up, trying to figure out the yo motion and everything like that. So I'm like, all right, cool. AJ pops his hamstring in the second half. And so AJ comes up to me during the second half when we're playing the Voodoo. And he's like, hey, he said, DJ, man, you're in the game. So I looked at him like, what are you talking about? And he said, oh, bro, you're in the game. Like this is the second half. Like, the game was back and forth. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So they know I love corner routes and post routes, cause how I stand, I set up this everything like that. So I'm like, all right, cool. I remember getting in the huddle, and then so Coach Talk calls on the headset. He said, wing right, wing yo, 50 bacon. I said, oh my God, let's go. I got a corner route. I said, I gotta seize this opportunity. I got to seize this opportunity. This was my one shot opportunity. I got to take advantage of this. So I remember going in yo motion. I was like so excited. Saw the play in my head. Literally everything just slowed down. I ran in motion. I stepped inside, beat the DB, stemmed up, and I was so excited. I ran the corner out, and here I was running. I was like, oh my God, I gotta catch this ball. I gotta catch this ball. I gotta catch this ball. In my head, I'm talking to myself as this route is going. And so I remember the ball came, and I caught the ball. I turned my back, smacked onto the boards, and I just got up and just jolted up. And I was like, what just happened? On DJ Lester. And so like I even messed up my celebration because I was so excited. I was like so much joke just when I grabbed my towel, I put it here. I was just lost. I was like, okay, what just happened? Everybody just started tapping me up, dabbing me up, da-da-da, Coach Sock. Oh my God. Da-da-da, asking me like what happened and why. I'm like, bro, I told you I was just looking for an opportunity. And so we ended up losing the game that day. I don't know if you remember that or not. And so they wrote an article about me, if any bright spot, Utah Blazers, DJ Lester, he comes in, works hard, da-da-da-da. And so I was kind of excited about that. I don't know if you remember that or not. And so that kind of went on to finish the season out. So we finished New Orleans. So the next week, in a couple of weeks, was going to Iowa. I don't know if you remember this or not. We
I
played Philadelphia, a whole another story. So we playing Iowa. I don't know if you remember this or not.
sort of
Barstow,
remember this.
yeah. So we flew to Iowa, to Des Moines, Iowa. And so obviously the big bus came and picked us up. So we bagged this claim. But me, I'm not pulling 2 plus 2 together. Like I'm just like, whatever. Like I'm signed, I got 5 games under my belt, get some film, da-da-da. So
Yep.
landed for it. Bus picks us up. And so we're sitting there and I'm like, okay, cool, So we get to the Wells Fargo Arena. We go through security incidents. So I'm like,
Does
might
this
just
look
play like
familiar?
area. The heck? Like, okay. So we go through, I see Kurt Warner's name, and then Coach Ho comes up to me right on the field. Hey, he said, LS, man, look, I see you got picked up by the Utah team. Next year, I want you to come play for me. So I'm like, okay, whatever that means. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Right. It was Bacon Bowl at the time. So I'm like, all right. So we ended up playing the game and I scored 2 touchdowns. I had one. I went through people, put the football behind, scored a touchdown, a slant route, scored a touchdown. And so we ended up beating Iowa in Iowa for the Bacon Bowl. So we got a little big thing of bacon. Bacon. I don't know if you remember that. And so I'm like, okay, like I'm starting to get my opportunity. People starting to take notice now. And so, cause even like everybody told me, hey, you should have signed him, not let him go. So after that game, we go back. And so we finished the season off. And so at the end of the season, I don't know if you remember this or not, they brought us into the Energy Solutions Arena where the Jazz play. And they said, hey, look, we're not going to have a team next year. We're going to
I
cease
remember
operation.
that.
Yeah, it
Yep.
was. Yeah. I was like, oh my
Yep.
God, we go back to square one again.
Yep. I remember that, just Utah telling you that they weren't going to have a team, and it just kind of like crushed your soul a little bit there.
Yeah. So I was like, man, we back to square one again. So we started connecting again and start chopping it up like, man, what's the next course of action? You know what I mean? So I was like, well, I'm back to a rookie. I was on a rookie contract. All these other players that have multi-year contracts got dispersed to the league. So I'm like, oh my God, here we go again. Back to square one. Got to figure it out again. So we had talked at the time. And so obviously I remember Coach Ho told me, hey, look, you know what I mean? Like you can come play for me
Yep.
next year. But we had talked. And so that's when Coach Fuller went to Bemidji. So can you
Yep.
talk about that experience? Talk to me about that.
Yes. So Bemidji was an expansion team in the IFL. Bemidji, Minnesota, way up north,
Yeah.
cold, which didn't matter for a player like you for an opportunity. Coach Fuller, who actually didn't get to coach you, but he was going to sign you, he really wanted you. And
Yeah.
Coach Baldwin was going to stay at Green Bay. He didn't really want to give you up because he really liked you. But I think, through Coach Baldwin knowing, that you were my guy and Coach Fuller was my coach, he basically said, if he's
Yeah.
going to send you anywhere, Coach Fuller was the only guy that can have you. So he was kind enough to make that happen, knowing that, my connection to Coach Fuller with you would eventually get you to Bemidji.
Yeah.
And really, Coach Fuller, he brought Ryan Ballantyne in as well, who was your teammate at Green
Yeah.
Bay, and he really wanted to run that offense around you and Ryan together. And you and Ryan had a
Yeah.
very good chemistry just from being in Green Bay together.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really sure what to expect with, the city or the town of Bemidji because I'd never been there. I'd never even heard of it
Yeah.
until they got an expansion team. But it seemed like at that point it didn't really matter to you and I. We just wanted the best
Yeah.
opportunity. And I was most familiar with Coach Fuller.
Yeah.
And you were basically going by my guidance. You didn't really care between the two, I feel like,
Yeah.
but you were one of those players that really listened to my advice and sort of, leaned on me to put you in the best situation. That's kind of how you and I always
Yeah.
worked together, worked well together.
Yeah.
And we got you to Bemidji. And I don't know if you were going to say this next step, DJ, but the thing I'll always
Yeah.
remember about Bemidji was I
Mhm.
think you played 2 games there. And your second
Okay.
game, you
Yeah.
you want me to wait for you to get there? Or you want me to share the story?
Oh, no, because I was gonna
Okay.
share. So before I'll let you finish that, because I was gonna
Okay.
just talk about it before we get to that point. So I'll give
Go
me a
ahead.
second real quick. So
Yes.
obviously, when we made plans for me to go to Bemidji, I don't know if you remember or not, we called. And so it's like, hey, like, we want to get you to Bemidji, Minnesota. And so
Yes.
I paid for the flight to come all the way to Minneapolis, and you picked me up from the airport. You remember that,
Yep.
right?
Yes.
And
Yep.
then I ended,
Good.
yeah,
Good ad here. I
yeah,
forgot
I
about
wanted,
this, but good.
yeah, I want to bring that up because I stayed at your house overnight and took the Greyhound bus all the way to Bemidji that the next morning or whatever. You
Yes.
dropped me off at the bus hound, took the Greyhound all the way up there, and so that's why I want to add that detail so people get the whole full experience because I flew
Yes.
out there, I stayed at your house overnight, and then you kind of
You had a
take care of
long
me.
wait.
Look,
I remember you had
yeah,
a long wait and a long journey to get there.
yep. Most definitely. So I wanted to add that detail. So when I got to Bemidji, now we can kind of talk about everything, how we kind of got into camp. We stayed like in the cabins far away. It was snowing
Yes.
pretty hard. It was very cold, being
Some
the
players
negative,
were
like
freaked
negative.
out by the
Yeah.
cabins because they thought, why? I
Yep.
remember Tim Dandridge, you remember him, defensive back?
Yep.
He
Yep.
he freaked out at first because he thought he was out in the wild in a cabin and like
Yeah.
cougars and bears were gonna come up to him and stuff. So
Yeah.
great guy, but I had to share that story because I got a kick out of that.
Yeah.
So
Yep. So, but then, yeah, so that kind of correlated to, we practiced and kind of got facilitated because we practiced at the college up there. And then, so that's how we got acclimated,
yes,
whatever. But yeah, so now we kind of
yes,
go into everything, start playing the game. We played a little preseason game out there, what I mean, kind of get our feet wet. And then you can kind of talk
yes.
about the experience in the game now.
Yeah, I can't remember who Bemidji was playing, but I think it was your second game of the season. Was it Green Bay? Maybe I can't
Yeah, I
remember.
think, yep.
I think it was Green Bay, your old team. And I remember you and Ryan Ballantyne put on a show that game. I want to
Yeah.
say you caught 2 touchdowns. I feel like you had some
Yeah.
Superman celebration. Is that right? Am I remembering that
Yeah,
right?
I had the pass, but then threw the touchdown. Remember my pants fell down and I
Yes.
still got the clip to this
Yes.
day. My pants fell down. So I went, the ball was hanging too high. So I'm looking, I'm like, get here, get here. So when I caught it, the DB fell at my hip, then my pants slipped down, but I just didn't care. I got up,
Yes.
picked the ball went in the stands. I just started going up. So you can see Ryan pointing like this. They put like a little image in pointing at
Yes.
me. It just went crazy. And then
I
I ended up scoring a 2-point conversion. I don't know if you remember that. So that's when I caught the
yes.
ball and I ran to the middle of the
Yes.
field and put the football down like I was sleeping, just went crazy. Dummy that game.
I forgot about your pants falling down, but I remember it now.
Yeah.
You're probably happy that I actually forgot about that part of it, DJ. I just remembered the great touchdown that you have. But now that you say that, I knew there was something interesting about that touchdown.
Yeah.
But you absolutely balled out that game. And I remember being so
Yeah.
excited. I'm like, oh my God, DJ's going to have a great season. And Coach Fuller was so excited about you. And
Yeah.
that was like, to me, that was like your coming out game, so to speak, to be like,
Yeah.
now the rest of the league is on alert. They know who
Yeah.
DJ last year is and that, you are a very good football player and you can do a lot of damage in the indoor football world. So
Yeah.
then we'll get to the next step. I'll let you tell that one after the game.
Yeah.
You had sent me a
Yeah,
text.
we just chilling, like we got done. So I met my little fan TV and I got a little picture with the little fan because he was sitting next to me during the game. So I remember just sitting there, I had a picture of me. I was wearing number 9. So I had my hand on the little podium. So the kid just come sat right next to me. And so, I told him, I said, I got a touchdown ball for you. I got you. So I ended up scoring a touchdown. I gave it to him. So we became friends and kind of built our relationship. And so I'm like, all right, like people started, like you said, starting to get to notice who I am, starting to get my feet wet, like get my name out there. And so we get done with the game, had meet and greet, met everybody else or whatever. So we went to the locker rooms to take showers or whatnot. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I look at my phone and I had all these missed calls and messages like, hey man, you need to get on a flight to Des Moines for tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. and we at Camp of William Penn in Oskaloosa. I'm like, oh my God. So I'm like, hey, Shashi Mess, like, bro, what do we do? Like, I'm like, okay, do I stay here? You know what I'm saying? Or do I go up to the
Yeah.
AFL and get, more experience? I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? And this was like 11 o'clock at nighttime. You know what I mean? I'm like,
That was a stressful but good
yeah,
situation we were
yeah.
in at that point.
Yeah, I was like, "Man, what do you do?" So I was like, "Okay, well, maybe let's just take this opportunity." You know what I mean? And so we took
Yeah.
that chance. And so got on a flight. Literally, it was like when we got done taking the showers, we ran up to the cabins, went to pack my bags, pack everything, and literally got dropped off by Big Nate. You know what I mean? Drove the little team
Yeah.
van to the airport
Yes. Yep.
right early that morning. You know what I mean? So I'm like, "Oh my God," So
Yeah.
we got there, dropped off, and I was like, "Okay, let's go take advantage." So we ended up going to William Penn, back to Des Moines, Iowa. We went to William Penn in
Y-
Oskaloosa for camp, and that's where that kinda happened. And so because then we went through camp and I got my goggles and became Superman that year, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, and just balled out
That
that
was
year and got my
I feel
chance.
like that
Yeah.
was a crazy situation because I felt like you were so at that point, like you were Bemidji's guy, you and Ryan, and you were
Yeah.
set at Bemidji to do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
But it's hard not to take an AFL opportunity, especially at that time where
Yeah.
the AFL was like a premier league. I was
Yeah.
nervous about it because I thought I don't want them to sit there and you're there for 2 or 3 weeks because you hear so many AFL stories of players sleeping
Yeah.
on couches for months before they finally send them home
Yeah.
and they hey, you're going to get your opportunity. It never comes around. But it was a chance you took and it actually worked out very well for you. So, and
Yeah.
I was so excited about you going to Bemidji, but at the same time, you were actually closer to me in Des Moines, Iowa. So I was excited
Yeah.
to have you closer to me and I'd be able to see you a lot more in person, So
Yeah.
it was a good situation, but kind of a nerve wracking one. So,
Yeah, I felt like I made a name for myself. Obviously, like I wanted to start, but like I felt like I was doing what I needed to. But like you talked about the crucial injuries that kind of hindered a lot of stuff, but
yep.
psychologically it was kind of concerned. But I still made myself relevant. You know what I mean, for the
Yeah.
opportunities I had. That kind of correlated that. So kind of going to that experience. Obviously, we stayed connected to it that way, and I went to New Orleans and played after that. Went to Washington. Then I came back to Cedar Rapids and played again that way. But
Yes.
that's
Yep.
where like my coming out party basically came from, like from that opportunity. So with all those experiences and situations, from your perspective, how did you see me grow through all that, would you say?
How did I see you going through all that you said?
Like grow as a
Growing.
person. Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. I think for me, I always felt like you were such a good person and you were always listening to advice and kind of guidance. But I think how I saw you kind of grow through as a person was kind of the adversity. I feel like each situation sort of taught you something different. And I think I even think for you, like the confidence and mentality of football, as you started making plays and other people started seeing you make plays, I saw you grow into a great football player, which is very important. But I think the most important thing is probably a great leader as well. I know that a lot of players looked up to you. I think a lot of people saw you as, almost what I saw in myself as kind of, a person to rely on as they got to know this game of football better.
Yeah.
I had so many players hit me up, and I know that you were a positive influence on them through your experiences, and you were able to help other players out. I
Yeah.
remember this might be getting a little off topic from the question, DJ. I apologize, but
No,
I
you're
will
good.
never.
Like I said, this was yeah.
Yeah, well, I will never forget when you were in Iowa and you were well established, and I had a text message from a guy named Rashad Rich. Do you remember him?
Yeah.
And he was in the same situation as you were, where he had basically no film for me to go off of. And he actually reminded me a lot of you. Really good
Yeah.
person, hard worker. And you were able to help him by having him reach out to me and give him guidance. And I don't know if you know this, but Rashad, very hard worker. He is actually now a recruiting coordinator for the University of Colorado.
Yeah.
And when we talk about relationships, like the question you asked about before, his relationships were built through indoor football. And it didn't always go the way he wanted it to go, but I feel like you saw yourself in him, when he was with
Yeah.
Iowa, when he was going through the 2-day thing, and really he was able to go through similar situations where he was working hard and going through adversity and taking every opportunity he could, moving from city to city to play football. And eventually that landed him a CFL workout where they liked
Yeah.
him, but they didn't like him enough as a player to sign him. But they saw how hard he worked and what a person he was. And Saskatchewan actually offered him a job instead of
Yeah.
signing him as a player. And that then morphed into this situation of him going to Penn State as a recruiting coordinator and going to Colorado. So I think what I'm getting at here is I think, you growing as a person, you probably didn't realize at this time, but you were able to help a lot of players because you took your situation and you saw yourself in these guys and you were able to, sort of help guide these guys.
Yeah.
And I think, mentally as a person, you really grew. And, you had already gone through a lot of adversity, but now you were able to understand the grind and adversity that it took in indoor football. And I think you made the most out of that opportunity. And it really kind of, you became sort of the player in person through the grind and adversity that you went through. So the leadership skills and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I kind of started back way back in college because as you realize, most people don't realize I played safety and DB my freshman year out of high school.
I forgot about
Before
you telling
switching
me
over.
that.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, before switching over to receiver. So basically, what Travis Hunter is doing, I wish I could have did because I played 1 year safety receiver as a true freshman. Then I switched over to receiver 1 year, but I learned how to play receiver by looking at the play cards, and that's what people don't understand. I started watching the play cards on scout team. That's how I got so good at receiver because I was writing up the starting ones, and coaches get pissed off about that. Like, man, like you got to see the play, you know the play, but how's he making the
Yeah.
catches and whatnot. And
Yeah.
so that's how everything kind of came about. So I feel like my leadership came from there and just kind of watching other people and just kind of talking to people. But I put myself in other people's shoes, realizing that not everybody gets the same opportunity. Some people are great, but just like you said, we talk about the timing, we talk about relationship, we talk about just being in the right position. So I wanted to help as much as people as I can and get, the
Yeah.
opportunity like I never had. So that's kind of something that kind of grew in me.
Yep, and I think one of the most underrated or special things about a player maybe is how much a player cares about his teammates. And I feel like I really saw that in you because, you were constantly having me help out other people that needed help, and I feel like
Yeah.
there's so many players in this league that I can name on my fingers that really cared about their teammates. And I just think, you going through your situation, you kind of had a special place in your heart for, helping other people and kind of guiding them and maybe guiding them towards me or whatever. So
Yeah.
I don't think you always get that with any player, the amount of care, off the field that they have for their teammates. And I think that's sort of what is special about you is
Yeah.
that people really kind of, bonded with you because they knew, you really cared about them as well.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what it's about. It's the brotherhood, you kind of create, I mean, the camaraderie and you share with people. So as far as that, what do you think happens mentally to players who get released and how do you think they need to stay ready when things feel uncertain?
Yeah, I think that players that get released, I always tell them they can go one of two ways. Number one is you can realize that, it was an opportunity, it just wasn't meant to be. You play with a chip on your shoulder. A lot of players, they play very well in camp, and no matter what they do, they still get released. And that really bothers
Mhm.
guys. And sometimes the biggest fear I have with players that happens to is that they will, lose the confidence, not trust the process, and because it's, their first opportunity also becomes their last opportunity because they're like, hey, I'm out of here. I'm not going through this. This league isn't for me. And it really kind of rattles them and it starts to make them they basically ponder whether football is for them or not, or do they need to go back home and get a 9 to 5 job or whatever.
Yeah,
I will tell you that some of my best players in indoor football have gotten released and then they bounce back. I think you almost have to go through it to really
yeah,
understand the process. So really it's one of two things. Either, you suck it up and you learn from it and it's just part of the adversity that we talked about and you bounce back and you give it another shot or you basically let it get to you and you let it end your career and you're done. And I've seen players
yeah.
do both things. So
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that perspective. I definitely appreciate that. So what would you say football has taught you about life?
well, I think football's taught me a lot about life, and honestly, like, playing in high school, it teaches you some things, but I think kind of getting to join that special bond with the players I help is really what taught me adversity, what players go through. Well, that's obviously a big thing that any player knows. Everybody goes through adversity and how you bounce back from that. But I think what football probably has taught me the most is just how much hard work it is to get to where you are. You like I said before, this may sound like a broken record here, but if you don't know what players go through, I think a lot of people's perspective is that players are just good at what they do and they just happen to be lucky that they
Yeah,
get paid to do something they love. And I will be honest, there's a lot of players that don't love football. They're just good at it and they work
yeah.
hard at. Then there's guys like yourself and a lot of people that love it, but that doesn't take away how much work it takes to get to where you are. And that
Yeah.
has to do with injuries, the mental aspect of it. And I think if anything, football has kind of taught me that there's going to be rough situations and you can always bounce back from it, or you can basically run from it, so to speak. So it's really up to you. So much of it is the mental aspect of which way you want to go with that, you know? So
Yeah.
it also builds character. I feel like if you can go through the adversity of football and situations in life, there's obviously certain things that football is never going to be able to teach you with, certain things that happen in your life with adversity, whether that's in death or whatever. But I think you can always take those coping mechanisms from football because football is it can be a great day one day and a horrible day the next day, and you kind of learn those life skills from the ups and downs in life, and not everything is always fair, just like in life.
Yeah, most definitely, definitely. Okay. The other question I have is, so why do you think feel like some people make it and some don't? And then can you tell me, can you tell someone chasing a dream, with no clear path, what do they need to do, to make it, or what can you tell them advice wise?
Yeah, so I think let's go to the second question first, the advice. I would
Okay.
say somebody who doesn't have a clear path, I would say a big thing is something that you kind of brought up before is making your connections. I think a
Mhm.
lot of guys get caught up in spending a lot of money and going to workouts, and those workouts,
Yeah.
they think they're going to kill those workouts, and they might, but they don't understand the opportunity with them. There's so many, I hate to call them scams, but you really can't, you got to do your research, I think. You got to know you got to trust the right people. You can't believe everything that a coach tells you. You got to do your background. I think you really got to get somebody kind of like me, and I'm not just saying me, but I've sort of, I feel like players sort of depended on me, but you got to get somebody that can kind of scope out the entire league and opportunities, because there's so many players that I
Yeah.
will talk to, and they will believe everything a coach says. And you got to have somebody that knows these guys, and you got to have somebody that can tell you the situation you're getting into, so you know it before you go. Because so many guys think, I don't care what's in front of me, I will go ball out, and I will give this coach no choice. And I don't care what people say. There's some situations where that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're not getting in the situation where you have a fair shot. But to answer your question, the advice I'd say would just be kind of get the right people in your court, do your research, and work really hard, and be willing to adapt, and be willing to, like in your shoes, bounce from city to city before you get your feet wet.
Yeah.
Football is not, it's not an easy sport to, you'll never be satisfied, I guess is kind of what I'm saying, because
Yeah.
you can be there one day and gone the next. So you just got to be able to adjust and have an open mind. And then, sorry, what was the first question? I've forgotten already.
I just said, why do some people make it and some others don't?
Obviously, for me, I mean, there's obviously a talent factor. You have to have talent. Some players are not as good as they think, but I think the difference between really good players is probably the mental aspect of it. There's so many players out there with talent. There's a million good athletes out there. There's a million players who have the dream to play football. And I think what separates those guys is, one is the work ethic. You have to have a great work ethic. I mean, you have to basically live for football. You've got to be around the clock. You've got to do other things in life and enjoy life. I'm not saying, put the pressure on yourself 24/7, but you have to be 100% committed mentally and physically to it, because that comes to the second thing is, I think, the mental aspect of people is obviously, the difference between making it and not making it. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's probably the two biggest things to me where I see players making it and not making it. So,
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that perspective. Okay. And the final thing I have is, so if you could describe my journey, okay, in one word, what would it be and why?
wow, that's hard to do in one word, especially on the spot. I'm trying to
You
think
can
here.
list off
One,
as many as you can. Okay, we can give you
okay,
three. We can say three. We'll
okay,
give
let's see.
it.
I would say if I could describe your journey in, let's say, 3 words, I would say very resilient. I would say there's so many words that are coming to my mind to describe this. I'd say
Just
resilient.
ramble them off. Say we ain't gonna limit you. Go ahead, man. Do your thing.
I would say committed. I would say committed, resilient, and the sacrifices. I'd say sacrifice would be a keyword because I think for you, I think it would be easy for you to not to give up on your journey, where you came from and had such, I want to say, bad things happen to you in your life, and then to go through a football career and your college career not going the way you wanted it to, you not having a lot of film and you going through a lot of, adversity in college, going to Snow College, doing well, going to Wyoming, things not going exactly the way you wanted to there. And then for you to continue to keep your dream alive and go through sacrifices and go from city to city and sleep on couches and fly to Des Moines with $20. That takes a lot of dedication, be resilient, and just I think toughness is you have to have mental toughness, and you had all that stuff. And I could probably talk about the person you are for a whole nother segment, DJ. I really could. I've helped a lot of indoor football players, but I feel like the person that you are, and if people ever get the chance to meet you and know your story and just know you as a person, I remember you. Whenever I come to games, you were always you went out of your way to make sure that I had the amount of tickets I needed and I was, taken care of. And, I feel like you always looked out for me as well, just the people in your life and so to speak. So I know that got a little bit off topic there, but there's so many words I could use for your football journey. So if there's anything I didn't answer there, let me know. But
No, but no, that's you answered everything. I mean, you said helped you out. I just reciprocated the energy. I'm an energy
yes,
person, right? People take care of me, I take care of them. That's just how I grew up, right? And
yeah,
so all that being said, I was gonna just tell you, man, like from the bottom of my heart, I tell you, thank you for everything you did for me. I have to give you your flowers in that accord, because not a lot of people can say that, they did a lot of things for people, from where I come from and how I was raised is you give people, their flowers and respect for what they do for you. I grew up in a
yes,
small community when I grew up as a kid, we were always about community. And people don't realize this about me. I'm very quiet and I might look mean, right? But I'm the most
yeah,
caring person in the world, right? But don't piss me off to the point where I have to treat you that way. I treat people how they
yeah.
treat me. You're good, I treat you even better type of thing,
I've
right?
I've I've
And
seen you
so,
mad too, DJ. So not at me, but I've
yeah.
seen you mad for people who have kind of crossed the wrong end of things with you. So and rightfully so.
Yeah. So, but no, yeah, I was gonna say just thank you. You know what I mean? And just obviously thank
Yes,
you for being on the podcast. We do appreciate it. And to kind of wrap things up, I was gonna ask you one last thing, okay? What does
yes.
beneath the surface mean to you?
I think for me, just following kind of your story and stuff, I think what it means to me is if I look at one word, is maybe hope for other people who are in bad situations to work their way out of it and kind of live out their dreams and go for it. You gave a lot of sacrifice in your career, and I think if anything, it just kind of shares your story and gives people hope and kind of encouragement because I think you don't know what people are going through. And I'm sure there's
Uh,
people out there listening to your story and your journey, and it probably means a lot to them. They can relate. And, you probably don't realize it, but you're probably helping a lot of people out that are going through tough times and have gone through similar stories. And they might be kind of afraid to share their story. And I think for you, it's probably been really helpful to share your story and let people know your story and your journey just to, kind of get into something where you're making a positive into a negative. It's kind of like that sad story with a happy ending, and just to let people know that, you kind of make of life of what it is, by
yeah.
rebounding and just because you go through something bad doesn't mean that, bad things are going to happen. You kind of make the most out of that. So that's kind of what I would share with that.
Okay. Thank you. You know what I'm saying? So thank you guys for tuning in, right? This is why we go beneath the surface. So you guys can cover the shores and make us who we are, right? Always remember, even a bad penny turns up, right? So thank you guys for tuning in. So if this story touched your heart, make sure to share with somebody because we're all here just kind of share a glimpse of hope for everybody. Okay. Thank you guys for tuning in. Until next time.
Thank you.